All right, cool. It's 11:10, so let's get started. Um, Thanks for being here. This is Learning to Pair. So we put this on the calendar because PD has changed. This used to be like an entire kind of like PD session, where similar to like what you're going to have in this afternoon, you would get a full session and there were a lot more kind of like activities. But as we're heading into the second week and into your first pair project, we thought it was important for you to at least get some of this, kind of like the most important parts, moving forward, so that you have like some kind of framework where you can have some idea of like why we take pairing so seriously at Turing, and what to expect kind of like coming up in your pair project and beyond, because you'll have a pair project and a group project for each module at Turing. All right. Yeah, so the objectives today are going to be like understand what a DTR is, and how to hold a DTR conversation, understand a couple of forms of pair programming that exist. We're going to be doing mostly or probably exclusively remote, just considering the situation that we're in. But yeah, there's a couple of different styles that we'll talk about. And then really just kind of like be thinking about like what your expectations are in a working relationship, how things have gone well in the past, how they've gone poorly in the past, and maybe some paths to addressing problems when they do arise, because inevitably, probably at your time at Turing, you're going to have some issues come up in a pair or group project, and we want to have some approaches to dealing with those issues. Cool. Yeah, moving on. Okay, yeah, so the why is pairing a focus at Turing. So uh, the simplest way I can put this is software development is a team sport. All right. There's that whole like stereotype of like some like fat old white dude in his basement, like working on software, is like a horrible stereotype and is not how the industry actually works. So we want y'all to not only get practice at this, but get good at it, right? Like we want you to become well versed in the communication strategies necessary for an optimal pairing in an optimal team environment. All right. And so you will have, like I said, a pair project and a group project each mod. And the idea is you're always going to be working on teams. Generally, software teams are pretty small, like somewhere in the 3 to 5 range. And you're going to work closely with these people, and it's going to be every day. And the better team it is, the more productive the product, like the more productive software you're going to put out for the product. So that's why we focus on it, and that's it's something that you're going to be doing for the rest of your career. So take it seriously, ask the questions as they come up, and really think about what you need, what your goals are from each pairing. A lot of times, this first one is a big learning kind of there's a big learning gap that happens where there's a lot of like, I wish I had said this sooner, I wish I had done this sooner, and that's okay. This is your first one, but the more clear that you can be about your own goals and expectations up front, the better this pairing is going to go. And the more specific you can be when you do your DTR, which is define the relationship, the more specific you can be in asking and advocating for what you need in a partner project, just in general, the better that will go. Yeah, so I think that's all I'll say about that. Cool. So thinking of your past working experiences, I want to take probably 7 or 8 minutes for this. I'm gonna put y'all in breakout groups, and it's pretty simple, right? When have these teams been successful that you've seen, and when have they not been successful? And then the one thing I would add to this is just why. Like, why, in your opinion, did that happen that way? Cool. So questions on just like pairing in general before I do breakout rooms, like anything coming up like right away where you're like, I don't know what you're saying about this, or I've got more questions about this. Anything is open for the table if you have any questions.
So, so Tim, the what does DTR mean?
It means define the relationship, and I'm going to drop like
Ah,
um, at a latter point during the session, I'm going to drop this link, which provides like a framework for the entire like DTR conversation. And we recommend that like the DTR conversation is the first conversation you have when we assign the project. And for this first one, we actually require you to send us a link to your gist or your Google Doc, wherever you create it, to show us that like, yes, you did hold this conversation, and yes, you are kind of answering these questions and thinking about these things that we're asking you to. Great question. Anything else coming up? All right, I'm gonna put y'all in breakout groups and we'll come back in about 8 minutes at 24. I'm gonna resume the recording. Great. I'd love to hear from a group or two about what you talked about, maybe some of the things that you've seen in really successful teams, some of the things that you've seen in unsuccessful teams, and yeah, anything that was shared that was particularly interesting. Yeah, so if you want to raise your hand if you want to share. Cool, Travis. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think a good point that somebody in my group raised was just what an important part of respecting each other is. It's just makes everything flow better. You don't need a prodigy or a genius in your group. You just need everybody to feel like they're contributing and to respect each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ties into some of the developer empathy sessions that we'll be presenting in Gear Up, of really just what respect looks like for all people, creating space for everyone to have a voice, not talking over people. And you really need to be more intentional, I would say, in this remote space, because it's so much easier to like to make those mistakes, right? To be excited and talk over, or to, not totally like have the right connection and not hear when someone's finished and you start talking, or two people kind of in a group like start talking and talking and talking, and then everyone else kind of feels ostracized, and like they don't get to use their voice. So it's intentional, these ideas of being intentional about creating space to have everyone's voice be present. Cool. So yeah, Logan, go ahead. Love to hear from you.
One point my group made was that it's really easy if you're able to divide your work up and come back as one to get the job done.
Yeah, so that's like a strategy that is going to be necessary during your time in pair projects and group projects, right? Like sometimes I'll hear groups like, hey, we did everything together. Great. Like if you can make that work and you both have the stamina to be on a Zoom call for every single second of doing the project, hey, you are a saint and great job. However, I don't think that's going to be the case for all projects. So you need to be able to have the trust and the dependability to be able to break up chunks of the projects and give yourself that time and space alone and solo, even within the group, like a pair project, to do some of that work on your own. Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's hear from Daniel.
Someone in my group brought up an important point. I think it's not just about technical knowledge as a skill for group sessions. It's also other skills such as like leadership or an ability to pull people together to work better as a team. There's other skills that isn't just related to technical knowledge that can be useful for groups.
100%. Yeah. Like most engineering managers are not the most technically skilled people on their team. They are the most empathetically skilled people of their team, and they know how to deal with different people on their team in a way that helps them be the best developer on their team. This is, I'm talking about like ideal great engineering managers in this case. Like this isn't how it is for every team. Not everyone's a great manager, but in an ideal situation, right, the engineering manager isn't the most technically proficient person on the team and doesn't have the most domain knowledge, but they are the best at shielding the team from distractions and getting that team to work together. All right, so those soft skills are vital to your work as a developer. Cool. We didn't hear from any of the ladies. I'd love to hear from at least one lady on this topic so that we can make sure we're getting some other perspectives. Cool. Yeah. Carson, go ahead.
So Saren raised a good point of you need to put aside your ego, or like you have to be on a team where the ego is put to the side, because we're all going to have things that we're going to run into that we don't know how to do or that we're going to need help on. And it's just important to all work together and not have that feeling of superiority.
100%, and that ego really has no place at Turing, so put it away now because it's not going to help you or anyone that you're paired with become a better developer. Cool. Yeah, Arike.
This isn't so much from my experience as in a paired project, it's more in the group, but like I definitely struggled with the like weird shame of being the least technically advanced in the group, and kind of feeling like, how do I contribute when I feel like everyone else is like, when I'm the one kind of like doing the whole, am I holding them back? Am I asking too many questions? And all these other like nonsense things that aren't really real. I think like if you guys can come together and decide that we're all gonna learn together, that's gonna be like awesome. And it also, as a point of strategy, like the easier iterations are 1 and 2. Once you get to 3 and 4, they're substantially more difficult. So if you just, there's no shame in just like requesting that like you take on iteration 1 if you do in fact self-diagnose yourself as like that's your stretch point. Like, so I just wanted to like say that out there. Like we often talk about like how do we keep everyone happy, but I think like also and we talk about the like jerk with the ego that like is moving too fast, but also the like person who's kind of like the underdog, if you will, has its own dynamics that you gotta like shovel through as well. And I think just being really explicit about like, hey, I just want to like contribute to the team, can you tell me where that best fits, is a better conversation than like staying quiet and not learning as you go either.
100%. I want you to advocate for yourself in your own learning in these projects, no matter where you think you fall on this like technical spectrum, because I can promise you that from what I've seen from students, generally they are wrong about where they fall in general, whether they think they are so great or they think they are going to hold people back. It's like not usually the case. And either way, I think that goes back to this message I posted over the weekend, like the idea, these fallacies of I'm going to hold people back or I already know enough. Like I kind of like, I'm not going to repeat myself, but they're fallacies for a reason, and you will need to both ask for help and give help at many different points in this program, and both situations are valid, and there's no shame in either situation. And the better that you can communicate, the better that you can teach, the better that you can ask for help in a way that advocates for your learning. All of these things are skills that you're going to take with you long after Mod 1. All right, and so that's why we talk about them now. Cool. Thanks everyone for sharing. I'm going to share my screen again. And that is the DTR. I don't want that one. Cool. Where are we? Here. Cool, yeah, so some types of pair programming and some expectations. So driver navigator, y'all should be like at least somewhat familiar with by now. It's the idea of like, all right, someone sharing their screen and they are typing the commands, but they are not typing those commands until their navigator or navigators are clear about what they expect and what commands should be being typed at that time. So ping-pong pairing is this idea of like, if this would be like if you all are kind of like right sitting next to each other, or you could do this with I think it's called teletype in Atom, and then there's like this other one in VS Code, but like Atom has it. It's like this way for you all to like share the same editor and type at the same time. So it'd be like, okay, you write this test for this method, and then I'll write the method for this, and we will just like share the same screen. It works a lot easier in person, but there are some technologies within Atom, I believe it's called teletype, where you can you know, share the same window and be both typing at the same time. So that would be like, hey, you type this line, I'll type the next line, and that's like how you can go back and forth. And then distributed pairing, you're going to be doing that with both of these types of pairings, right? Like that's kind of the overarching what you will be doing. And this is kind of like what we have to work with. And so you know the tools, you've got Slack, you've got Zoom, whatever you kind of prefer for the video conferencing is up to you there. Just for the sake of time, I don't think we're gonna like talk too much about benefits and all that. Let's get into the DTR. Cool, so the link to the template is here. I will also drop it, it's here. I'll drop it in the channel real quick, unless someone already has. Teletype, thanks Dan. Great. And so this is like the template. There are some guiding questions. We don't expect you to answer all of these, but they are, you know, some guiding questions to help getting the conversation started and things to think about. We've got some remote work considerations. And like I said, because we are remote, that communication needs to be more intentional. It needs to be, you know, more thoughtful and more sensitive to how things can come across when we're losing all of that nonverbal, right? We don't have a ton of body language or a ton of rapport that we've built up in person to help us with these pairings. So we've got to just, it's harder, and we have to recognize that and then put in some structures in place to help tackle that. And then, yeah, we've got this template down here at the bottom for the DTR. This is what we expect to be filled out for this pair project and for your group project moving forward. You can always go back to this, but generally, when we see groups or pairs having issues, first thing we'll ask is, okay, like, let's go back to the DTR. And if you say we didn't DTR, that is a big red flag and probably part of the reason that you are in whatever, you know, problematic situation that you are in. So this is super important. It's going to be something you do for each project. And like I said, the more specific and the more intentional you can be with regards to your schedule, the way that you work, your strengths, and the goals that you have for the project, the better. All right. Yeah. Let's go back to the slides. Cool. So anything coming up like that you want to talk about off of this first glance? You know, what are some things to keep in mind that anyone wants to say aloud to the group? Cool. Yeah. John, go ahead.
So this might be jumping the gun, but I'm just looking at DTR with mentors. And this is a question that's been bothering me for a little bit. My mentor is a first-time mentor, and he never attended Turing, which, you know, he has a lot of really great qualities and he's very awesome. But I don't know how to DTR with someone when it's my first time being a mentee as well.
Totally.
And I could see that happening with the group project. I don't know how to define things if I don't know the situation as well because I'm new to coding.
Yeah, totally. And I would expect this to be like a learning process for both. And that's kind of why we have these questions and templates to guide the conversation. Like, we don't expect you to be an expert at this, but we do expect you to attempt to try to, like, you know, answer some of the questions, think about some of your own strengths, some of your own goals, and put those in writing is really the big thing. So that then you have a something, if expectations are not being met at some point in the middle of the project, you can go back to the DTR and say, hey, I think we need to revisit the DTR. I think we're kind of getting away from our goals, and I think we need to, like, either re-DTR, which is something that happens, or we need to just talk through the DTR, what each of us meant when we said this, and kind of like reset in that way. That part of the reason that we put this mentor DTR link in here is because mentorship can look pretty different for different people, right? Like, you might have a mentor that's like, hey, this is my get a job mentor. This is my person that's going to help me get interviews and navigate the interview process and do that in Phoenix, Arizona, right? That's a specific type of mentor, right? You might have a mentor, you're like, this is my weekly technical mentor. I'm gonna work on independent challenges, Ruby exercises with this person. They're great. They show me all these like new skills technically. I don't think I would reach out to this person for help with a job, because we just are on, like, we're pretty have different outputs or outlooks of like what industries we want to be in for that, right? So you can have different mentors for different things, all right? And like, you're not limited to just the mentor you were assigned. You can ask for the mentor spreadsheet, the database spreadsheet, and reach out to anyone that's on there. And I encourage that you do, because like when I went through Mod 1 the first time, didn't meet with my mentor. I think at that point we had to reach out. We didn't get assigned, but didn't have a mentor. Then my second time through, I had 3, and I used all of them throughout the rest of Turing, and they were all kind of like bringing something different to the table. So that's something to think about, and that's why we put this mentor DTR on here. Cool. So other things coming up about this template? Okay, I'm gonna move on then. Okay, what else should we consider here in these remote relationships? I think number 1, it's be professional, right? Like, remember that this Turing environment is meant to emulate a work environment. So don't say something to your fellow cohort mate that you wouldn't say to a teammate with, say, an HR department, and a chance of you visiting that HR department if you said something inappropriate. All right, so take into consideration that people probably have a different set of experiences than you, a different background, and be very thoughtful and careful when you are communicating and sharing opinions. Do it in a way that is professional and that is respectful of all backgrounds. All right, that's what I would say to consider. Does anyone have some thoughts or some things they want to share to consider that I haven't addressed?
I would just piggyback on that, Tim, just going back to like, be an advocate for yourself. As scary as it may seem in the beginning, because you feel like you don't know somebody very well or whatever, allow yourself the opportunity to express maybe where you feel vulnerable in the group right away, so that things can get nipped in the bud right away, or at least now you're coming from a place of like, here's where I stand. And then now you're offering your teammates the opportunity to collaborate with you from where you stand, and then they can collaborate with you from where they stand.
Yeah, I love it. And I like what I would say is like, don't expect your teammate to be a mind reader, right? Like they're not going to be able to figure out exactly where you like how you're feeling and where you want to practice and where you're struggling unless you communicate those things. So like Danny said up front, being the like vulnerability begets vulnerability, right? If you can share, be a little vulnerable in the beginning and kind of like be genuine and honest about how you're feeling about whether it's technical or Turing in general or what's going on in your life, like that stuff will help as like being upfront about that stuff will help the pairing, in my opinion. Priya, go ahead.
I'm not sure if anybody mentioned this already, but one of the things that my group in our breakout had talked about that I thought might be important to say is that if you're struggling with DTR or with a group or a project or a mentor or anything, it doesn't hurt to think of the unhealthy stuff either. That's kind of what we talked about in our group, is that we may not know like what we have for expectations of our partners or ourselves or even our mentors, but we know what we've experienced in life that didn't work, or in a group that we hated or whatever. And so it's okay to think of it from that perspective too, like what you don't want to see.
Totally. I think that's worth like talking about in your DTR, right? Like, hey, like here's a way that I've seen things really go south, and this is why I want to avoid this, and this is why that didn't gel with my communication style. You know, all of that is valid and worth certainly worth talking about. Cool. We're gonna skip this journaling based on time. However, I think it's worth showing this slide and saying that if you're kind of if you haven't done this sort of thing before where you've defined a working relationship, if you're even unclear of what your expectations look like, return to this slide and take some time, you know, whatever it is. We would probably give you about 10 minutes, 8 minutes, somewhere in there, so it's not a ton of time to do this on your own, but return to this and give yourself the space to look at this and to really think deeply about this even before you come to that DTR, because when you are working with, you know, a partner, you will probably bring more to the table if you spent some time by yourself to do some work with yourself. Cool. I'm going to pivot real quick. We are going to give Darren the floor. He is going to talk to you about academic integrity, and you probably got like a similar talk from Rachel up front, but he's here to talk to us a little bit about that.
Hello, what up? So you did get this conversation or this talk at orientation from Rachel, but since I was not present at your orientation and there has been a couple of weeks since you guys have started the program, we want to reiterate this policy to you because it's really important. You will hear this again in your next module, and then the module after that, and then the module after that. We will keep hammering this in because it's really important. First, I want to start with our harassment policy. I'm not going to share my screen with you. I'm not going to put you through a slideshow. But what I want to discuss with you is the definition of our policy and kind of what we prohibit and what we think is important and that kind of thing. Before I jump into this, does anyone have any questions as to why we do this each module? No? Cool. So basically, our policy prohibits harassment. This includes sexual harassment of any kind. We will take appropriate and immediate actions in response to any complaints or knowledge of this or violations of this policy. For the purposes of this policy, harassment is defined as any verbal or physical conduct, whether in person or digital expressions. That's the most important part of this policy, is the fact that we are not in person. We don't see each other every day, but we do spend a lot of time in front of our computers and we do talk to each other digitally. So that's also really important. So any of this communication, verbal or physical, that is designed to threaten, intimidate, or coerce a student, employee, alumni, or any person working for or on the behalf of Turing is included in this policy. That also includes verbal taunting, including racial and ethnic slurs, that the person on the receiving end of this, if they perceive it to be, my mother is calling and texting me, I'm sorry. If they perceive this to be, in their opinion, that it impairs their ability to do their job or it impairs their learning environment, then it is included in this harassment. Again, the really important, or it's included in this harassment policy. The really important part of this whole thing is that we are in this environment where we are remote and that we do spend a lot of time in front of our screens and in digital expression. That's the most important, one of the most important parts about this, is that the person on the receiving end of this, if it's in their opinion that this thing impairs their learning environment or impairs their ability to perform, then we have to investigate. And if we investigate this and we find that this is harassment, then you can be asked to leave the program. And if you are asked to leave the program, we'll talk about refund policy and all that stuff at that time, but it will be an immediate expulsion. So what this means basically is any display of graphic or offensive material, any suggestive or offensive comments about nationality, origin, race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, body, etc., etc., etc. All of those things that are under the protected class kind of umbrella. No jokes. Locker room jokes just aren't funny. Jokes about stereotypes just aren't funny. When we talk about the display of graphic and offensive material, this can include t-shirts, anything in this little like box here, right? So anything that's behind you, anything that's on your shirt, just be really mindful and be really careful of those things, because those things are really important. Also, just make sure that you actually wear a shirt to class every day. Just gonna point that out. So when you're getting dressed in the morning, just be really careful and be mindful of the sayings and the designs and all of those things that are gonna be on your clothes and things like that. This policy does extend to places where Turing students may congregate. So if you guys do decide to meet in a group somewhere, like at a Starbucks or something like that, then this policy does extend to that. Even if it's not during like regular class hours, it doesn't matter. If you are together in a group, just be really careful of the things that you say, be really mindful of the things that you wear, be really mindful of your surroundings and the people around you, because if someone perceives, something offensive, it could be really bad for you moving forward. If you want to report an instance of harassment, you definitely can. You can let any staff member know. Or if it is a staff member that is doing the harassing, then you can reach out to one of the members of the director's team. That would be, for you guys, that would be Sal, or Ellen Mary, or Courtney. You can reach out to Jeff if you want to talk to him. He's not the best person to reach out to, so don't even reach out to him because he probably won't even respond. But you can reach out directly to Rachel. She is our general counsel and she's my boss. She's the director of finance and administration as well. So if you want to reach out to her, she's the person that's going to investigate your claim anyway. If you want to reach out anonymously, then you definitely can. You can go to turing.io/say something and put in your report there, and then that will go directly to Rachel and she will investigate. If you're uncomfortable with reporting to anyone on our staff, then we do have a board of directors and they're all listed in your student handbook, and you feel free to reach out to them. More than likely they're gonna just forward your report back to Rachel anyway, so that she can handle it. Know that Turing does have a no retaliation policy, so if you report an incident in good faith, then we are going to investigate it in good faith. that means that if you report something and a student if you report something and you are a student and and the other student who has been reported finds out, if that student tries to retaliate in any way, then that could be grounds for automatic dismissal from the program as well. Basically, summary of everything that I just said is just to be mindful that we all come from different places. We all have different sensitivities. We all have different ideals and different upbringing and all of that stuff. So just be really careful about your surroundings and be aware and open to learning new things. So in the case of false reporting, that's the reason why we have an investigation, right? Like you have to make sure that you investigate all of the people around who may have heard this instance or seen this instance of harassment, who were present in this instance of harassment. It's interesting because last week there was a whole thread of conversation in one of the Slack channels that probably a lot of you don't even really know about yet, but there was a really interesting conversation in that thread, and Jeff decided not to delete it, and it's just kind of a learning opportunity for everyone involved. It's a learning opportunity for the people of color on the staff, and it's a learning opportunity for folks who are not people of color on the staff as well. It was really hard to read, but you know, this person who created this conversation was not asked to leave the environment, was not asked to leave Slack, because ultimately, you know, we understand that everyone comes from different backgrounds, everyone comes from different experiences, and his experience was what he was talking about, and so you can't hold that against him. Just know that, like I said, if a situation comes up and if something is reported, we will do our best to investigate it in good faith. If it turns out to be something that is not true, or is just something that's stemming from personal experience or opinion, then there's not much we can do about, you know, that person, and we don't hold it against them. If you see something or hear something that's not in line with this policy and you think it's, you know, offensive to other people, please feel free to speak up. If it's not personally offensive to you, but you think it's offensive to other folks, please feel free to speak up, because not a lot of people, it can be hard for a lot of people to speak up for themselves. And if you're in a position of privilege, or if you're in a position to stand up for other people, then you should definitely do that. Okay, so moving on to academic integrity. So Rachel probably gave you her lawyery definition of what cheating at Turing is, and what we will do if you get caught cheating. It's probably very lawyery because she is an attorney. But what I will tell you is that Turing does give each of our students the agency to have integrity and the agency over their own learning environment and process, right? So if you present someone else's work as your own, your instructors will know, right? They are developers, they're not dumb, they will know. So you will get investigated, and if it turns out that you have cheated on a project or an assignment or an assessment or an evaluation, then you will be asked to leave the program. If you are asked to leave the program at any point, you will not receive job search support. So just be really careful with what you present as work. What you present as your own work. Basically what that means is using a line of code that you don't understand in a project or an assessment, giving information that you've learned about an assessment to other students, even before they've taken the assessment, after they've taken the assessment. You guys can have a conversation about your assessments and whether or not it was difficult and that kind of thing, but try not to share the details of those assessments with each other, just because you don't know if this person next to you failed the assessment and if they need to retake it. Those kinds of conversations can be trouble for you. We know that cheating comes from a place of desperation and panic. If you need help, reach out for help. That is what we are here for. That is what your instructors are here for. You can reach out to me for help. I'm not going to be a lot of help because I'm not a developer, but I can point you in the right way, point you to the right place if you need help. Seriously, reach out to your mentor, reach out to your student support fellows, reach out to your TAs, reach out to your instructors. Turing has this large environment of people around here to help you. There's no reason for you not to get the help that you need. If someone would like to help. Oh, thank you, Corey. One of the biggest, or one of the most important resources that you guys have are the other students in the program. So I would say start reaching outside of this cohort to ask for help if you need assistance. People that are above you in the program were literally just sitting in your seat just 6 weeks ago. So reach out to them for help. Drop into their cohort channels. Get to know them. They are more than willing to answer any questions you guys have and assist you as much as they possibly can. Join a posse. Those things are really, posse, student group. I get the connotation around posse, but join a student group. Those are going to be really important. Therefore, whether you resonate with your identity, whether you resonate with a hobby, or even if you just want to join a group just to kind of see what other people with different experiences and different backgrounds, what they're talking about. Join a student group because those things are really important. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Just a statement. Darren, thank you very much for taking your time today to go over these things with us.
No probs. Please wear shirts to class. That's ultimately, like, that's the most important thing I said. Don't be showing up without a shirt. I don't care how good you look without a shirt on. I don't really want to see it. Also, another, pants are, hey, you can't see if I'm wearing pants right now. Also, really important, no pants Fridays. Really important when you're sharing your screen with other people, just be really mindful of the things that are on your screens. Don't be showing people porn, that kind of thing. What you do in your personal business, or what you do in your personal life, is your business. I'm not going to tell you not to watch porn, but I'm just going to tell you not to watch porn and then share your screen with your classmates. Okay? Cool. Thanks, Tim.
Appreciate you, Darren. Thanks for coming in and talking to him again. Yeah, take it all seriously. I remember I was like pretty scared when I got this talk as a student. I'm like, I just need to be like very mindful of what I'm doing here. And then I was, and things are fine. So be mindful, all right? Cool.
Bye.
See ya. All right, so how about this? I am going to take up some of your lunch period today, but hopefully not much. Hopefully, I'm thinking 10 minutes of it, but you haven't gotten a break in a while and it's lunchtime. So how about this? Let's take 30, come back at 12:30. I'm gonna finish up the paired, there we got like a couple more slides on learning how to pair. They're pretty short. And then I'm gonna kick off Battleship, and that's it. But I want to give you all some time that's not like crazy. So actually, let's give you 40 minutes. Let's do 12:40. Sorry, I know I just changed it on you. Let's do 12:40. We come back. Thank you, 40, and we finish up the slideshow. But yeah, and I think you'll probably even have some time before the next class. But 40, I'll see you back here. All right, I'm gonna leave the room open and just pause to resume. Great, let's share. Great. Okay, jumping back into learning to pair. Just want to point these fallacies out one more time. I've already kind of like given some reasons why they are fallacies, and ways that we can move past these fallacies is being clear about your goals and being very aware of how much you actually get out of communicating, whether you are on the I am the teacher end or I am the student end. That communication is difficult on both ends, and it is worth practicing for both people because it is something you will do throughout your career. All right. Cool. So Holding each other accountable. So remember that this DTR matters. It's not just something you fill out once and like forget about. It matters. It's something that's you know, something that you can refer to as you can think of it as your contract as humans working together on this first paired project. This is the contract, and this is what we are going to take as our source of truth for what we want and how we will communicate, meet up, do all the things that we need to do for this project. Here's our contract of how that will happen. The other two things in here that I wanted to point out are retros and stand-ups. I don't think we've gone over what those are quite yet, but they're a big part of the software world. Stand-up, basically, high level is, it's gonna look a little different in between teams, but you meet at the beginning of the day. Excuse me. You meet at the beginning of the day and you discuss like, hey, this is what I accomplished yesterday and this is what I plan on working on today. Here are the goals for today. So it's like this check-in point daily for you to say like, hey, this is where we want to get to today. This is where we got to yesterday, and here's what I plan to do today. And as far as like, here we want to get through iteration 1, or we want to get through, you know, this group of methods or whatever it is. So it's a good way to like hold yourself accountable each day on like what you are doing and where you are at as far as progress. Retros are kind of the flip side of stand-ups. It's like, hey, let's talk about here's what we actually got accomplished, and here's what we set out to do, and let's see if we can bridge that gap if there is one, and let's talk about like how we are communicating and how we are working together, and maybe are there any areas that we could improve upon. It's a great place to kind of like have some, it's a nice space to have these conversations kind of scheduled of little check-in points. Like, okay, it's beginning of the day. Let's get this accomplished today. Here are our goals. Hey, we set our goals a little too, they were a little too ambitious at stand-up. Now we're in retro and we didn't get as much as we wanted done. Let's maybe like make these tweaks to get our expectations in line with reality and what's actually happening. Sometimes you might even re-DTR on longer projects. Definitely something to consider and that I would recommend. Cool. Crucial conversations. This is kind of like this idea that you're going to have tough conversations throughout your career, and you can certainly practice having them here. This project, you will give feedback to your partner on like, we'll have like a template, a set of questions, and you will give feedback to this partner, and remember that it's going to be specific, actionable, and kind. But we have to remember that when we're coming from a place that's filled with emotion, that really negative emotion, frustration, you know, you're tired maybe, you're a little bit angry about like how something came through, that's probably not the best time to have that conversation. So just being aware that emotions are going to come up. Totally okay to feel them. But remember, when you're giving feedback or having a conversation that is on the more difficult end, it's better to speak from a place of clear understanding, where you're saying like, here is my experience of what happened. Here is what I, you know, maybe would have liked to gone differently. And here are some steps I think we can take in order to do that. All right. And so this is kind of like when you're ready for these conversations. Say you have a retro coming up at the end of the project, and you know that there's been some things that have been difficult. You know, these are some steps that you can take to make sure that everyone feels safe. That's a huge thing. We have we believe in nonviolent communication here at Turing, and we have a framework for that. And you'll learn more about that in PD. But this is kind of like some of the steps that you can take to have these conversations and really get the most out of them, right? Because we're not perfect, and our partners are going to get a pretty wide lens of how we work, throughout the next 2 weeks. So we want to be able to give feedback in a way that is specific, actionable kind, and really useful for both parties, right? Giving feedback is a skill in itself, and we'll talk even more about that as the mod goes on and throughout Turing. But here are some basic kind of like jumping off points for having these tough conversations. Cool. Any questions coming up on this? Okay, moving right along then. So, Battleship, first paired project, pair project kickoff, very excited. So let's go through Battleship. If you've never played it, it's like another one of those similar to War. If you've never played it, you're going to have a better time building it if you know what to expect and how the game is played. So I expect that going to the Wikipedia Battleship page, or even playing it at home with like you and a family member or a roommate or a friend, whatever, will give you an idea of, think of every step that happens in this game. You will code a solution and a pathway for that step, all right? So be thinking about that. The learning goals, and these are in no particular order, but they're all important. TDD, right? Like, we use this framework in order to break down this huge problem of Battleship into small chunks that we can implement via write the test, run it, follow the error messages, implement a solution, run it, get it to green, and then if you have the ability, then refactor. All right, red, green, refactor, and TDD is our framework that we're going to work through here. Practice algorithmic thinking, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but create an object-oriented solution to a problem without being given full specifications. So this is big. So we have a spec for you, but it doesn't have everything that you will probably need to do, all right? So you get through a certain point of the spec, and then it's like, and now it's your turn to build objects in a way that makes sense for this project so that they can interact in a way that comes to some solution and is within this framework of single responsibility principle and encapsulated within a class, methods only doing one thing. All of these things that we've been talking about will be part of building your own objects that are not kind of specifically outlined for you. So if you got through, if you got to like the game portion of War or Peace, now there will be like more than just running the game. It will be thinking through which objects you need to help create this solution without being given the like guidelines on how to build those. Yeah, working in a pair. We just had our learning in a pair session. That's going to be a big part of this. And then using pull requests to collaborate with a partner. So this will be, we have a Git for pairs lesson coming up where Mike will spearhead kind of like what that looks like, what the workflow looks like. We'll get a chance to practice in there. And then Mike and I will kind of show that workflow with like a person one, person two, and us kind of like doing the GitHub thing and using pull requests, all right? So when we say use pull requests to collaborate, that doesn't mean just creating pull requests. It means commenting in line, using GitHub as a place to have conversations. Hey, I don't understand this piece of code. Can you please explain it? Yes, I can. Here, let me write this explanation for you right here and why I decided to do it this way. So this is a big part of it too, using GitHub as a tool to collaborate, all right? Yeah, questions coming up so far? Okay, so let's go to the setup page. So there are a number of things that you'll need to do here. We don't have a starter repo for you on this one. So it's kind of like, hey, like you go and do this yourself. So someone will need to create this Git repository and will need to add their partner as a collaborator so that they have push access to that repository. And then you will both be able to go through your own local branching and pushing and remote branching workflow, but you will basically, you can think of it as you'll share that same main branch, and all your pull requests are going to be to that main branch from some branch that you created on your own. And that main branch is going to be the same remote branch for both of you. Okay, so that remote main branch is the one that we want to be always functional and always be the one that is being pulled into, all right, via pull requests. So something to think about there. Yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say about this piece. And then if we go to our requirements page, it kind of like talks through what we expect, like creating an OOP solution to this problem and having very little code outside of a class, all right? And so that's what we mean by that is like, if you don't have a class, you don't really have an ability to test your code, so you're not really doing TDD if you have code outside of the class. So very little code should exist out of this class, and I will push you to say maybe like 2 or 3 lines of code at most. Yeah, and all methods that don't rely on user input need to be tested for this project, and that means like if you have a method that relies on 3 other methods, then all 3 of those methods need to be tested, plus the method that is calling into all of those methods. And so now this is going to get into the difference between unit and integration testing. And we're going to be looking for you to be able to call that out and test both scenarios. All right. I really recommend you spend some time here with your pair, probably every day, and just check in and say, hey, where are we at on this scale? Are we falling in this column? Are we in this column? Are we over here in exceptional? How do we know? Are we sure we're hitting everything they're asking for? And I really, I really encourage you to take a look at this as your source of truth for how we will evaluate the project and how we will move forward. Through how you will move forward throughout this project. Be checking in with this more than just the day before it's due. I promise you this is a good thing to look at every day to kind of frame where you want to be and where you're heading towards. All right, so take some time to look at the rubric with your pair once you all get started. It's 12:54. All right, I got a little time for questions that are coming up, and then I'll drop your partners in the channel. Yeah, Travis, go ahead.
I'm sure this is posted somewhere, but I haven't found it. When is it due?
So the project is due. It's on the calendar. Let me just do this. Oops. I believe it's due next Thursday is what I want to say. It's due, but I want to make sure of that. So let's see. Project evals next Thursday, the 16th. So it'll be due. Probably what we will likely do, which is a slight shift from last mod, is we'll probably cut you off at some point on Wednesday evening and say it is due Wednesday evening, because we're thinking of your best interest in that case, where it's like you're not going to be getting that much great code in beyond this point in the evening, and we don't want you staying up all night. We want you fresh for evals, fresh for the next day of class. So we will likely have it due some point in the evening on Wednesday. And then the thing that is due today is you need to have your DTR conversation today and have that turned in by 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Other questions coming up?
Are we making a gist of the DTR memo?
Yeah, so you can do a gist or a Google Doc. Just make sure we have access. Either one, whatever you prefer, is fine with us as well. But the submission form is in the assignments tracker, and yeah, either way is fine with us, whatever you decide. All right. I didn't see any other questions. So with that, I will drop into the channel your pairs, and then I will turn it over to whoever is next. It's either Kat or Mike.
So many options. It's Kat. So
All right. I'll make you
yeah,
the
but
host.
we'll has everyone had a break yet or no?
We started at 12:40, so we haven't had a break since then. So
Okay, we'll just start. We'll start at we'll say 1:05 just to give everyone a chance to jump around and move around.
cool. And I just dropped those pairs in the channel. And yeah, thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Tim. Good luck in your interview.
Thanks. Appreciate that.